Welcome to Read Poems Every Day. This morning, I took off my bookshelf a very interesting edition of Emily Bronte's novel Wuthering Heights that includes several of her poems as well. I've discovered that finding an edition of the novel plus poems is actually a little trickier than I thought. I found this one used online, only to discover that there's a slight printing error in this edition. After you finish reading Wuthering Heights and the poems begin, you make it about 5, 6 pages into the poetry section, and then you get a bunch of reprinted pages from the novel, and then the poetry section begins all over again. That is actually not relevant to what I want to talk about today, but I just thought I might share that discovery. I have read Wuthering Heights before, a long time ago, but I have not read very many of Bronte's poems. And in fact, the poem I have up on the screen is the very first poem that appears in this edition of the novel plus poems. So I thought we might go through it, and see what we see. Uh, get to know it a little bit. Okay, so this is Emily Bronte's I am the only being whose doom. Very, very Bronte-like poem here. Let's maybe if we blow it up. No, we'll keep it about this at this scale. Okay, I am the only being whose doom by Emily Brontë. And honestly, I'm not sure this is actually a title. This is just the first line of the poem, so it's a little strange that it's capitalized this way. Anyway, how about we read it? Okay, Bronte. I am the only being whose doom no tongue would ask, no eye would mourn. I never caused a thought of gloom, a smile of joy since I was born. In secret pleasure, secret tears, this changeful life has slipped away, as friendless after 18 years, as lone as on my natal day. There have been times I cannot hide, there have been times when this was drear, when my sad soul forgot its pride and longed for one to love me here. But those were in the early glow of feelings, sense subdued by care. And they have died so long ago, I hardly now believe they were. First melted off the hope of youth, then fancy's rainbow fast withdrew, and then experience told me truth in mortal bosoms never grew. 'Twas grief enough to think mankind all hollow, servile, insincere, but worse to trust to my own mind and find the same corruption there. All right, Bronte. Let's zoom in a little bit. I don't think we'll get too confused by the hanging indents introduced here by zooming in. Um, okay. Pretty uniform organization of the lines into stanzas in this poem, so we can kind of hop through pretty quick. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24 lines. So there are 24 lines. That's six 4-line stanzas, not 40K, 4-line stanzas. I might go through, let's post that quickly and just go through and highlight. So that's line 5, line 10, line 15, and line 20. So that will help a little bit as we continue through our notes here. Okay, 24 lines, 6 4-line stanzas, uniform line length. I am the only being whose doom no tongue would ask, no eye would mourn. So we have 8 beats, about 8 beats. Or if we're thinking metrically anyway, 4 feet. 4 feet. Very unusual for me to speak in a language of feet, metrical language of feet, but we'll let that be. Okay. 24 lines, 6 4-line stanzas, uniform line length. What else should we discuss? Enjambment, probably. Yeah, let's do that. Let's talk about enjambment, shall we? So we have enjambment right away in the first line. Doom, no. And the syntax is strange enough that it can trip you up. Since I had already read this poem before recording this video just this morning, I was a little prepared for it. But I do think when I was reading it silently to myself the first time through, and then sort of mouth the words silently to myself this morning, I did get a little tripped up on the organization of words in that first clause. Okay, so doom no, but then the rest of the lines have a punctuated pause, as do all of the lines in stanza 2. Okay, in stanza 3, um, line 11 there, so pride and line 11 to 12. We have enjambment. Also in the following stanza, glow of. Lines 13 to 14. Okay. Truth in, I think that those lines 19 to 20, I think. And then experience told me truth in mortal bosoms never grew. And then in the last stanza, do we have any instances of enjambment? We sure do. In fact, the only stanza with I was wrong when I say the only stanza, or the only time this is the case. Then I go back and discover I'm wrong about that. Mankind, all. So that's lines 21 to 22. And mind, and it's lines 23 to 24. So that last stanza, sort of nearer the end of the poem here, we have a sort of uptick in the frequency of enjambment, whereas in the first 5 stanzas, they're about 4.5 stanzas, you really don't have many at all, but these are pretty close. So this enjambment comes late in the penultimate stanza, and then you have two lines in the final stanza that have enjambment. But before that, this is the case here. We also don't have, let me look through. We do have some instances of caesura. I tend not to track these, but I might start doing it in some poems. Caesura, you'll remember caesura is when you have a punctuated pause midline, especially if it's like center mass in a line, although it doesn't have to be right in the middle. In the case of line 4, it absolutely is in the middle. A smile of joy, pause, since I was born. So in line 1, we have a caesura. Line 5, pleasure, secret. It's line 4. I don't know why I put that there. Okay. So no caesura in the rest of that stanza. Let's check stanza 3. No caesura. Nope. Nothing in that stanza. Stanza 5. No. And then the final stanza we have in line 22. We have a list. So this is sort of set 2 pauses midline. So servile is sort of right in the middle of the line, surrounded by commas and beats on either side. Servile, insincere. So it's line 22, I believe. And that's it. So actually, there are not very many midline pauses. So we're getting a handle on the kind of texture of the poem. the texture of the poem. Most of the lines, there are 24 lines, most of them have a punctuated pause at the end. Very few of them have a pause midline, just a few of them, with line 22 having two pauses. And then a few instances of enjambment with a sort of uptick of its frequency in the last six lines or so. Half of the last six lines are enjambed, whereas you have to make it all the way. You only have three instances of enjambment in the first 18 lines, so it's only about a sixth of the lines at that point. Okay, so you do have a kind of shift in how the poem's texture feels, right, as we interface with it. If we sort of, as we track enjambment in Caesura, that's what comes through. Okay, what about punctuation? Maybe actually punctuation should go up here. Punctuation, and he spells it correctly. Excellent. The first punctuation marks a semicolon in line 2. We'll go back and add more to that. We have a comma in line 3 and 4. Two commas in line 5. Line 6, line 7. Period in line 4 and 8. I imagine we have a period at the end of every stanza. Is that right? Yes, we do. Okay, so 12, 16, 20, and 24. So periods are, so the syntax of the poem lines up with the stanza, with the stanzas. Let's scroll through and find the semicolons then. So no semicolons in stanza 2. You have commas in stanza 3. So line 9 and 10 have commas. Semicolon. So we had one in line 2 and not again until line 14. Another comma in line 15. I think I'm counting these right. Line 15, line 17. Then we have a semicolon in line 18. Of course, the comma is in line 22. I think that's it. We also have apostrophe line 21. Missed the semicolon here. So we have commas and a semicolon in line 22. So line 22, right, have all of those there. Apostrophe in line 18. Probably have another one somewhere. Okay. So this punctuation. What about pronouns? We have, of course, the I, which is sort of repeats throughout, the only being, right? Interestingly, no other agent really appears here. So we have the I, but the I doesn't say, I never caused a thought of gloom in another person, just a thought of gloom, as if thoughts and smiles just sort of floated around, right? Uh, so yeah, first person. Okay, we do have a they. In line, is that line 15, I think? Line 15, and that refers to feelings. That's lines 15 and 16. So they and they here. So yeah, not many pronouns, just the first person singular pronouns, and then we have the one they that refers to feelings. But everything else is named. So note the concrete nouns throughout. I mean, some of them are conceptually abstract, but doom, gloom, joy, pleasure, life, uh, soul, glow, feelings, right? Youth, fancy, rainbow, bosom, grief. Okay, mankind. So you have the sort of concrete nouns throughout, not a lot of feelings there. So what insights might we draw here? Intensely focused on solitude, loneliness, or a kind of isolation. I want to be careful not to project too many descriptions onto the poem that aren't found in the poem itself. But because it's a kind of a poem about not being in relation to others, it's not that surprising that we don't see other pronouns, since it is a poem that's in part about um, experiencing life alone. It isn't surprising that there aren't um, others. No direct address, right? We don't find direct address here to anybody or to anything. There's no apostrophe as in terms of the literary trope or figure of speech. No direct address, no second or third person uh, pronouns that um, relate to things or people. Of course, the exception being the line that uses they to refer to the poet's own feelings, right? So even the one instance of third person pronoun refers to the speaker's own feelings. Um, okay, that seems significant. So you could already see how tracking these things helps kind of amplify and support the content of the poem, what it's saying, the kind of ideas it appears to be having, just by paying attention to these very simple things. Okay, sound and sense. Uh, okay, there's clear rhyme scheme here. AB rhyme scheme throughout. I'm not sure the one time that it kind of was slanted was when the poem rhymes care with were, but that might have more to do with my accent. I don't know if in Emily Bronte's English these words would have sounded a bit more what am I trying to say? That the sound of them would have aligned more than they do here. So for me, this is a kind of slant rhyme. I'm not sure if it would have been closer to a true rhyme for Bronte or not. But everything else seemed pretty straightforward, pretty clear kind of rhyme. You do have at the very end the kind of internal rhyme of mind and find, right? You have mankind, of course, but then mind and find right in a row there. So that's lines 25, or no, 21, and then 23 and 24. So Bronte is at times sort of is showing herself very capable of playing with internal rhyme, especially as she's sewing up the end of the poem. Okay, so any alliteration that stands out here? I mean, there's probably plenty of it, but anything that really caught me. To me, the rhyme kind of overwhelms any potential alliteration because you have a smile of joy since I was born. There's a way that you could see alliteration there, but it doesn't really feel like it. A smile. I mean, it is a repetition of the S sound, but it doesn't seem sort of purposefully um, it doesn't seem a necessarily intentional sound effect of the poem. A smile of joy since I was born. And so you do have the repetition of secret in line 5. Secret pleasures, secret tears. This changeful life has slipped away, as friendless after 18 years, as lone as on my natal day. You see some, the L's and the S's there do kind of form a pattern. So you have there have been, there in lines 9 to 10. There have been times, right? And then the when, when of lines 10 to 11. Here we have alliteration. This seems important. The sad soul of line 11. Um, L sound longed for one to love. That feels sort of purposefully alliterative to me. And to be clear, I'm just going on vibes here. I don't, there's not like a rule book I'm following to determine whether a sound effect is intentional or not. To some degree, all of it's intentional. But those were in the early glow. Since subdued, that one comes across pretty powerfully. That's line 14, I think. Okay, so fancy's rainbow, F sound. Fancy's rainbow fast. It's line 18. And then experience told me truth in mortal bosoms never grew. Told me truth. Does that stand out to us? Told me truth. That's one line. It's not a separate line. That's line 19. Told me truth. Oh, I was thinking of that in mortal. So the T in the middle of mortal, or in the beginning of the second syllable there. In mortal bosoms never grew. 'Twas grief enough to think. I'm not sure. Yeah, the grew and grief, but you do have that pause there at the end of the stanza, so I'm not sure it quite stands out. Um, the L sound in line 22, all hollow, servile, right? That stands out. But worse to trust to my own mind, to trust to 23. Okay, so that's just some sense of, yeah. I mean, maybe all we can sort of work out is that the poet, it is sort of weaving in, sometimes subtly, sometimes not, and sometimes just in a kind of pair of words that are either next to each other or separated just by one or two words, a sound effect that kind of gives the poem its musical quality, and this kind of amplifies, is that the right word? Supplements, complements the clear rhyme scheme that's already structuring the poem. All right, so we have 6 stanzas. So let's see if we can get a sense of the prose here. Get the prose sense here. Okay, so stanza 1. Okay, so the first stanza, it's actually, I mean, on the one hand, it can seem like the poem is about a person down on themselves, but there's also a way in which the poem, if the speaker is down on herself, there's a sort of amplification of that self-deprecation, uh, to the point of the speaker being an exceptional human being. I am the only being whose doom no tongue would ask, right? So it's if it's about a sadness or gloominess or depression, whatever word we might want to project onto the poem, and we should be careful about that. It's also what we also find is a speaker who amplifies their own condition, their own state of affairs to being not even exemplary, but exceptional, right? Because if you're exemplary, you're a good example of a kind of common or shared characteristic. Whereas if you're exceptional, you stand out. You are unique, right? So in some sense, yeah, a claim about the self, a big claim about the self, that they leave no trace or gloom or joy on others, about the exceptional self. But here, ironically, we say exceptional, we usually mean that in a positive way. Here, it has a negative valence to it, at least at first. Um, Description of the speaker's isolated but also secret life. So I think that's interesting. So hmm, a life kept from potential friends who might know it, the speaker, but a life that has changed, has changed. It has included pleasure and tears. Right? Maybe come back to this somewhat strange final line, as lone as on my natal day, because when we are born, we are not alone. There is always at least one other person there, right? And so that's kind of interesting. Maybe we'll scroll down to ideas and questions. What do we make of the absence of a family as a kind of presence that might mitigate friendlessness, or just the general absence of family, even on a natal day? Right? That seems pretty significant. Okay, there have been times I cannot hide. There have been times when this was drear. Hmm. Speaker recalls days when she cannot avoid a desire for life to be different. I have a coordination of a lot of things. Coordination of pride in isolation, but also sadness and longing for that condition of life to be different, right? For love, right? What does love mean in this case, right? But those who were in early glow, but those were in the early glow of feelings. So clarification that this longing is deep in the past, so to speak, in the early glow, right? What does it mean for feelings to be subdued by care? What does care mean here? What does care mean? In line, what line is that? 14? In line 14. Whatever it is, it subdues early feelings or longings. Hmm. So, in that sense, it's almost as if care means something like self discipline or maturity. I would stop short of equating it to something what we would now call a kind of self care, right? Um, hmm. Okay. So, stanza five then. So that was four, five, six. Yeah. Okay. So that stanza four, now stanza five. So the a sequence of maturity or maturation, let's call it, this is going to sound very academic, a sequence of affective maturation. That would definitely be a kind of phrase that I would be like, oh no, if I was in a paper and be like, can we just say this more plainly? Although as although in my own writing would very much maybe try to get away with it as I am doing here, a sequence of affective maturation. You first have the melting off of youthful hope. You know, hope goes. Um, then the faculty of fancy, right? And the development of experience. We then have the repetition of the speaker's exceptional exceptionalness, right? The speaker claims, and then experience told me truth. In mortal bosoms never grew. Huh. I mean, maybe it's less that the speaker's exceptional than that the truth. No, there's still something exceptional about the speaker, but it's also a claim about the truth, that truth is not derived from from inside a person, right? It grows through hardship, through the development of life. It comes from the outside, so to speak, or is the result of contact between the mortal bosom and the world. Okay. And then we have stanza six, which is really strange. Was grief enough? Hmm. Concludes with two griefs of mankind. This sort of clarifies why she's maybe not so sad through the majority of her life about being alone, since this is a speaker that thinks of other people as hollow, servile, insincere. This is also the first time there's a kind of explicit reference to other people. You do have the reference to one here. I longed for one to love me here, but not necessarily the name or noun referring to human beings. So I guess I could go back to, if we think of one as a pronoun, which it is. It's functioning as a pronoun in that stanza, so we should probably put that up there. What was that, line 10? No, 12. Line 12. I was looking at the highlighted line. So that's line 12. Okay. So of mankind and its vices, so to speak, of the fact that the speaker shares these vices. Now, one thing that remains unclear to me at this point is whether or not the speaker is worried that she'll find that same corruption, especially if she interacts with other people, or if she has indeed already found that corruption there. Hmm. 'Twas grief enough to think mankind all hollow, servile, insincere, but worse to trust to my own mind and find the same corruption there. It does seem that she has found it. It isn't just that the sort of worry that in the future she might. Okay. Yeah. Fact that maybe the worry that the speaker shares these vices. Okay, I think I'm gonna pause there. We'll come back tomorrow and in a video that probably won't be quite as long, he said, and wrap up form and figures. Maybe see if we can develop these ideas and questions a bit, and then wrap up the contexts, possible context that could help us continue to get to know this poem a bit. Okay. Well, thanks for spending time with Emily Bronte's "I Am the Only Being Whose Doom." And hey, let's read more poems tomorrow.